think gender is very present in people's lives and conceptualizations of their identity itself. So I'll just briefly summarize what we know from the empirical research. We do have a gender evidence brief that kind of does review this. Generally, there are two aspects that we find strong gender differences in social connection and social behavior. The first has to do with social connection. There's a strong, what we call homophily, there's a strong tendency for people to socialize with people of their same gender. And so men tend to socialize with men, women tend to socialize with women. The evolutionary perspective on that is that the division of labor throughout human evolution has always put men as being hunters and women being kind of more collectors, and that those two kind of social roles are now kind of baked in. The kind of next thing that we find gender differences are kind of relates to that evolutionary theory that we see that men tend to be more okay with doing things together, not a lot of emotional and social connection, not a lot of emotional talk, I guess, whereas women tend to deal much more in like the emotional, deeper conversations and talk. And so again, that relates to if you're hunting, you need to be quiet and maintain a very kind of low presence, and if you're gathering, it's all about information exchange and where are the berries, where is the resources, and it's very much about that. So there are like reasons to believe that there are these gender differences. So I guess I don't want to gaslight you when I say this next thing. Almost all gender differences in social connection behavior are very small, and that if you overlap the distributions, if you plot both genders, most of us will be overlapping. Your need for emotional and social connection, fulfillment, deep conversation, gossip, all of that, men and women are largely overlapping. And that there is slight differences that come out because people like me, academics, we get to publish papers that say, oh look, we found this cool gender difference, but actually is what we found is a statistical anomaly in which women are slightly more likely, meaning there are a few women who are much more maybe emotionally deep. But I think that tells us that some of our concepts of gender get in the way of how we socialize and connect. And I think there's a lot of pressure on men and women to conform to a certain ideal or stereotype of what it means to be a man or a woman. And I think that hurts both genders and unique in different ways. Not only for your spousal relationships in which those men are from Mars, women are from Venus issues come up. But empirically, what we see is that those are generally very small differences. They're overestimated, and that whatever differences do lie appear to largely be the result of cultural norms and pressures. On loneliness in particular, and this is the last thing to say because I feel the heat of lava radiating on my right side now, is that in loneliness, some early research, we thought there was some big differences in loneliness between men and women, and that women were maybe more susceptible to loneliness. Some people start to argue that if you act a direct measure versus an indirect measure, so if you use the word lonely or not, that more women will identify as lonely if you use the word lonely. Eventually we find that those are still very small differences, and whatever differences do exist probably differ in the underlying risk factors for loneliness and not the actual subjective experience of loneliness. And I think that this is important to say just for one reason, because gender is definitely one of the most common moderators that I get asked about. The other is introversion and extroversion. And everything I just said for gender really applies to introversion and extroversion as well. And I think the lesson here is that social connection and our needs for deep, emotionally fulfilling connections with other human beings is a universal experience. There appears to be no differences according to ethnicity or income, age, gender, all of that sort of thing. Those only have very small effects, and that at the end of the day, everybody needs the same experiences of connection. So yeah, that's kind of what the evidence that exists now says.